In the heart of a city filled with opportunity and danger, a young boy stood at the crossroads of fate. From a humble beginning, he would climb the ranks of the criminal underworld. His name became synonymous with power, fear, and respect. How did he transform from a scared little boy to the most notorious gangster the world has ever seen? This is the untold story of cunning, ambition, and a relentless drive that changed the face of organized crime forever. This is the story of Al Capone. Gloomy Beginnings. Unlike other Italian mafia bosses who immigrated to the United States at some point, Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born on American soil in New York City in 1899 to Italian immigrant parents. His father was a barber while his mother was a seamstress, and they both left their tiny abode just outside of Naples to seek a better life for their children. Just 6 years after moving, they gave birth to the infamous American crime lord, though they were unaware of it at that point. As the fourth child of 8 children of a lower middle-class family, Al Capone didn't have all he wanted growing up. Although he did not have much, young Al Capone was still able to attend school, albeit a strict Catholic school, up until he hit a female teacher in the face when he was 14. This incident led to his expulsion, and with his schooling out of the way, Al Capone began to do some odd jobs to help around the family. He sold candy or helped out at a bookbinder cutter some days, and on others, he worked at the bowling alley or the ammunition plant. Al Capone was finally getting over the ugly incident at school. He even started playing semi-professional football for about 2 years before he gave in to peer pressure and was influenced by Johnny Torrio, who eventually became his mentor. This wasn't surprising because Al Capone, who was 19 years old at the time, couldn't rely on odd jobs anymore to take care of his wife and disabled son. Therefore, Capone graduated from doing odd jobs to working with small-time gangs such as the Bowery Boys and the Junior 40 Thieves. He then joined the Brooklyn Rippers for a while, before finally joining the infamous 5 Points Gang, the same gang as his mentor Johnny Torrio and the Mafia godfather Lucky Luciano. His time with the gang birthed the incident that resulted in his infamous nickname, Scarface, which he hated very much. Slashed in the face by the brother of a woman he insulted while working, Al Capone never admitted the true origins of his scars for a long time. To bury the memory of the incident, Al Capone hid that side of his face during photographs, and when asked about the scars, he called them battle scars. Turning point. At this point, New York was strongly becoming under the control of the Sicilian Mafia. Hence, most of the Italian Mafia moved to other parts of the US to gain control. Johnny Torrio was invited to Chicago by the crime boss James Big Jim Colosimo to serve as an enforcer, and in 1919, he extended the invitation to Al Capone to join him. When Capone first arrived in Chicago, he started working as a bouncer in a brothel, which is believed to where he contracted syphilis. Although Capone knew about his infection early on, he never sought treatment, even though an early intervention with Salvarsan could have cured him. Things went well in Chicago, and by 1923, Capone had made enough money to purchase a modest house at 7244 South Prairie Avenue in the Park Manor neighborhood on Chicago's South Side for $5,500. Taking advantage of the Prohibition era, Al Capone joined the other mafiosos in expanding the bootlegging business. He expanded his operations by collaborating with Canadian bootleggers to smuggle liquor into the United States, a fact he dismissed so many times. From there onward, his growth in the underworld was explosive, and with such immense change, he was bound to catch the public's attention. He was reported in the Chicago Tribune on May 8, 1924, as having been involved in the killing of a hijacker, Joe Howard, who attempted to mess with his and Torrio's bootlegging operation. Around the late 1930s, Al Capone was talked about again in the newspapers, but this time around it was in the sports catalog, where he was mentioned as a boxing promoter. The crime boss who invited Torrio to Chicago was declared dead on May 11, 1920, in an assassination event that had Al Capone's stench on it. With Colosimo gone, Torio took over his empire, and his trusted mentee became his right-hand man. Torio led a powerful Italian organized crime group, the largest in Chicago, and Capone was instrumental in its operations. Although Torio stepped on a pile of bodies to reach the top, he preferred to avoid violent gang wars and often tried to negotiate territory agreements with rival groups. However, tension grew with the smaller North Side gang, led by Dean O'Banion, particularly as the Jenna brothers, who were allies of Torio, began encroaching on their territory. Despite Torio's claims of being a mediator, he didn't support O'Banion against the Jenna brothers. This conflict led to a turning point when Torio arranged for O'Banion to be murdered in his flower shop on November 10, 1924. This act thrust Jaime Weiss into the leadership of the North Side gang, with Vincent Drucci and Bugs Moran supporting him. As a close friend of O'Banion, Weiss was determined to avenge his death. The clash. The enmity continued to brew, and it catalyzed a significant change in Al Capone's criminal career. Just 12 days after Al Capone experienced a close call to death in an ambush in 1925, his mentor Torio was shot multiple times while returning from a shopping trip. Although he survived the attack, it crippled him mentally so much that he gave the mantle of leadership to Capone, who was just 26 at the time. Under Capone's leadership, the organization expanded its operations, which included illegal breweries and a transportation network that extended all the way to Canada, backed by political and law enforcement protection. Unlike Torio, Al Capone didn't shy away from using violence to boost profits. Establishments that refused to buy liquor from him often faced dire consequences, including bombings, which claimed as many as 100 lives during the 1920s. He wasn't only raising the number of fatalities, but also increasing prostitution by multiplying the number of brothels in the city. By this time, Capone had become a national figure, constantly in the public eye. Hence, he needed protection. To do this, he based his operations in Cicero, Illinois, where he used bribery and intimidation to control local elections, making it harder for the North Side gang to strike at him. But despite his precautions, violence found a way to sneak back at him. And when it came, Capone's driver fell victim. The man was found, tortured, and murdered. And in retaliation, there was an assassination attempt on Jaime Weiss in the Chicago Loop. This prompted the North Siders to strike again. This time around, they staged a bold attack outside Capone's headquarters at the Hawthorne Inn, opening fire with Thompson submachine guns and shotguns in 1926. Narrowly escaping the attack, Al Capone decided to take a step back from violence and propose a truce, but it didn't work. So Capone did what he knew how to best. Just a few weeks later, on October 11th, Weiss was killed outside the North Siders' headquarters at O'Banion's former flower shop. The gang didn't let this go, and 3 months after the death of Weiss, the owner of the Hawthorne Inn's restaurant, who was a friend of Capone's, was kidnapped and murdered by Moran and Drucci. Tensions escalated, and Capone became more concerned about his safety and began seeking ways to distance himself from Chicago. He frequently took spontaneous trips with his entourage, often buying an entire Pullman sleeping car on a night train to destinations like Cleveland, Omaha, Kansas City, Little Rock, or Hot Springs, Arkansas. And upon reaching their destinations, they would spend a week in luxury hotel suites under assumed names to keep a low profile. In search of a more permanent escape, Capone bought a 10,000 square foot home on Palm Island, Florida from Clarence Bush of the Anheuser-Busch brewing family for $40,000. The property, located between Miami and Miami Beach, offered Capone a luxurious retreat away from the escalating violence in Chicago. After escaping, Al Capone returned to teaching the North Side gang a lesson. In a brutal attempt to eliminate Bugs Moran, the leader of the North Side gang, Capone ordered a massacre all the way from his Florida home. This bloody attack was commissioned after a hijacking incident where an expensive shipment of whiskey, illegally imported from Canada via the Detroit River, was stolen en route to Cook County, Illinois. To carefully plan the attack, Capone's men rented an apartment directly across from Moran's headquarters, a trucking warehouse and garage located at 2122 North Clark Street. On the morning of February 14, 1929, Capone's outlooks gave the signal. and 4 gunmen disguised as police officers staged a fake police raid. The imposters lined up 7 of Moran's men against a wall and then called in their accomplices, who were armed with machine guns and shotguns. However, Moran himself was not even among the victims that day. Photos of the massacre's aftermath shocked the public, severely damaging Capone's reputation. Within days, Capone was summoned to testify before a Chicago grand jury for federal prohibition violations, but he missed the date with the excuse of being ill. In an effort to repair his public image, Capone made charitable donations and even sponsored a soup kitchen in Chicago during the Great Depression. However, these deeds did little to redeem his public reputation, as in his final days, he was even refused service by a hospital. For more dark stories of the underworld, subscribe to the channel and smash the notification bell to never miss an update.